Great fucking name, by the way. Tomer Strolight.
Yeah, you put it actually.
Strolight.
Strolight.
Subscribe to
Is it like a
Bitcoin.
Mid-Journey Indiana Jones kind of vibe?
I had
or no?
yes, that's what Greg created, and I didn't even connect the dot. I failed to connect the dots until he. I wrote the article that Mysteries and Indiana Jones was like scrounging for mysterious relics in the blockchain.
All right, you guys ready?
Yep.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome in. You made it to another episode of the Meme Factory podcast. This is stream test number 94. And this evening, we're joined by Tomer Strolight. Tomer, say hi.
Hi.
Tomer, I feel like at this point is a big enough figure in the Bitcoin community that I don't need to make him introduce himself further than that. But that doesn't mean we aren't left with some things that we have to do. So, to start off, if you could check your Telegram, Suscorp has sent the ad copy for the week over.
There it is.
Yeah, if you don't mind reading through it so we can get through and get paid, that'd be absolutely fantastic.
I understand. You got to pay the bills.
Got it.
There's the first read though, so we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
Tomer elected to take it live.
Live. Who's got time to prepare? Hey there, underground warriors and skeptical sleuths. Tomer Strolight here. Ever feel like you're buying into something that's not what it seems? Investing your faith in a product that doesn't deliver on its promises? Introducing Goldmine Conceal, the new concealer makeup from Suscorp. The only makeup that's 100% transparent about what it's hiding. Each jar of cream even comes with 3 ounces of 24 karat gold. Trust us. No faux pas too big, no scandal too juicy. Do you really want to amplify that bruised look? We didn't think so. With Goldmine Conceal, everything can be blocked away. Our new concealer is like a green screen for your face. Just plop our concealer over that black eye and check back later. Voila, you're a masterpiece of plausible deniability. Now, we're not storing any golden promises here. We're offering guaranteed on-your-face value. This is genuine, fully audited concealer cream. That's right, verified by actual skincare experts, not Twitter experts. Look, folks, in an age where even the mighty can trip over their own hubris and call it a dance, isn't it time you had a makeup that'll keep you in the clear without freezing out dissent? So make sure you've got something worth its weight in gold. Use code TRIPLEDOWN to dig up a 20% discount off your first order. Remember, this isn't just makeup. It's making up for something.
Hey.
Yay!
That was amazing,
Beautiful.
You have a wonderful delivery.
All those courses in reading. And
Wait, back up. You took courses in reading?
Yeah,
it's like first grade, second grade, third grade,
and I kept up.
Yeah.
I'm reading it like a grade 6 level
That
now.
was really good. It's one of the best ad reads yet. All right, so we're gonna hand it on over to Becca to make sure you get fed while so you're not doing this whole thing on an empty stomach here, but you got to make your choices.
Okay.
Yeah, Tomer, I have some sandwich menu options for you today. I have 3 options. I have Raiders of the Lost UTXO. So this is a aged RBF, which is a roast beef fed mushroom burger. It's this no fee burger. It's free, but it may or may not be delivered. So you're taking a risk there. So our second one is the Temple of Don't Stop Believing. This is Yellow's famous Don't Stop Believing steak sandwich. It's been marinated in Red Bull for 654 days. Yeah. That's also a mystery how that steak stays together that long.
A Red Bull.
And, yes.
Red Bull and depression.
Yes. Yellow sad. And our last one is the last mystery. So it's mystery meat that's been collected by your friends over at the Swan team, and it's autonomously, I hope I pronounced that incorrectly, put together in the kitchen, and there's no women needed for this sandwich, which is going to be a mystery. Like, how do sandwiches get made without women? So Here we go.
Wow. I mean, they all sound amazing. I wish I could have a little bit of all of them.
Well,
If I have to choose, I think you've really sold the last one really well. The last mystery. Again, I'm really drawn to the curiosity of how such a thing could happen in this universe. So I will order the last mystery and see what comes up with that.
excellent.
Ooh.
We'll have that over to you.
I think that question is one of the many questions you try to analyze in your latest article about mysteries.
Right, right.
Yes.
You know?
I do want to talk about his latest article.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Let's
So
talk about
your
That was a transition, Craig.
I know, and it was a wonderful one. Thank you.
I thought it was a segue.
This easy transition, and everyone's like, yeah, that sounds interesting.
God damn it.
No
I
one
thought
picked it
you
up
were
and
going to
handed it.
continue with it. I didn't realize you were giving me an alley oop, but I
Okay.
appreciate it nonetheless. Now, let's.
Mystery.
Bitcoin, you've said, is endless mysteries.
It is, and I can prove it to you.
Ooh,
Okay, prove it to me.
the time
Well,
chain.
The article that I wrote is actually called "Bitcoin: An Endless Chain of Mysteries,"
Yes.
and
linked in the show.
and in it, I was drawn to the topic of mysteries inside of Bitcoin, and the endless chain of mysteries is kind of the second point that I make, and so because they kind of flow logically. The first thing is so I'm going to come around to how it's an endless chain of mysteries, but there's a little bit of lead in because you have to go through the hierarchy of things. The first mystery that I pointed out is that people are really drawn to mysteries, and that's what drew people into Bitcoin initially. The first people who were drawn into Bitcoin weren't drawn in because they believed that this was going to be the worldwide successful money for the digital age. They were drawn in because this mysterious creator, this mysterious person called Satoshi Nakamoto, claimed to have solved a problem that mathematicians had proven could not be solved. Like there's a mathematical proof that you cannot solve the thing that we now know as the double spend problem, or that was commonly referred to as the Byzantine generals problem. And somebody shows up out of the blue saying, well, I've solved it, even though it can't be solved. And so the initial verifiers of Bitcoin, the initial curious group of people, were there to see if this person's claim to have solved an unsolvable problem were legitimate. And in fact, that they found out that he had, although the proof wasn't invalid, what he had done was he had come up with a workaround. And the Byzantine generals problem basically stated you cannot develop sustained consensus in a decentralized distributed system. There's some either you have someone who's in charge and they tell everybody what the final solution is, or you don't have anybody in charge and everybody forks off on their own eventually. And what Satoshi did, for people who understand how Bitcoin works, is we don't necessarily have consensus right away. We have consensus eventually. If there's a discrepancy, the discrepancy gets resolved and everyone comes into consensus. So this was his solution. He did it using proof of work. And that's really the only solution that exists right now for preventing
A hierarchy.
fracking, for preventing hierarchy and preventing forking. Right? We have one chain with no hierarchy in it. So so he solved this unsolvable problem, this mystery, and that was like this incredible thing. He made the impossible possible by working around the edges of the case. And how did he do it? This to me is he did it by creating an endless chain of mysteries.
Yeah.
Like every block,
Literally. Nobody
knows what block height are we at right now? Who's got a block explorer?
We go to timechaincalendar.com real quick.
Yeah, let's give a plug for timechaincalendar.com.
Timechain calendar.
804,717.
17. Yep.
804,717. So everyone in the world knows the solution. Like 20 minutes ago or whenever that block was on, nobody knew what the solution to block 804,717 was. And no one knows what the solution to block 804,718 is, right? It's like it's a new mystery, and people could only start working on it when they had the solution to block 804,717, because the solution to block 804,717 is part of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
And without it, you like the block header that you need is like you need 804,717's block hash, and then everything else that you're putting into block 804 718. And so it is an endless chain of mysteries, right? As soon as the next block is discovered, it creates a mystery, which is what's the solution for the next block. And this goes on for as long as there are positive integers, which is infinity. So it is an endless chain of mysteries as long as Bitcoin exists, and it'll always exist because there's always a next block to discover, even if it's otherwise empty. There's a mystery to be solved, which should, on average, take 10 minutes to solve.
Now, we spoke about this briefly before the show started about his solution to the Byzantine generals problem, or the double spend problem of instant consensus. And part of the way he solved it was he cheated.
That's in the same way that Captain Kirk cheated on that, some test.
Kobayashi Maru, better know exactly.
Yeah, which you were supposed to fail.
Yeah.
What's funny is it's again this example of the perfect is the enemy of the good, right? The perfect is the enemy of the practical. Like he came up with a solution that works in practice, and so someone who comes up with a theory and it says, well, in theory this can't be done, but it can in reality be done. It's a bad theory, and it's too tight a theory, right? Like we can all live with settlement for a global standard of money taking 10 minutes or 20 minutes to settle.
Let's back it up. What do we say as cheating? What is cheating in the
what was it?
What aspect is it cheating?
Because it's not instant.
Yeah.
All right. So the problem is
why?
Everyone was looking at the problem backwards. Everyone was saying we need the minute that something is published that everyone agrees to it, and that's why it's impossible, because two people can publish something at the same time. That's oversimplified. Two people can publish something at the same time, and how do you know which one has authority unless you grant special authority to one of them? And so that was always the problem in distributed architecture.
Outside the quantum mechanics, is there an instant? Isn't it a spectrum?
Well,
what instant is?
Aren't you on the
what is time?
That you're limited by the speed of light, I suppose, in terms of distributing consensus. But in a local environment like the planet Earth, that's pretty accurate, right? Like it's instant and within the speed of light to travel anywhere in the world is pretty much.
Like I used to download Naked Women when I was 16 with a 56K modem.
Yeah, that took a while.
And that was pretty instant.
Well, that was instant for you, was it?
Back then it was instant. Like I was
Wait.
I was finished pretty soon. I was 16, like you get the boost.
Listen, it's faster than going and finding a real woman, right?
Yeah.
Still is for you, I'm sure.
It's all a matter of perspective.
What was instant, Yellow?
A lot.
Before your time.
All of it.
Young one.
All of it.
All right, so let's get to how the cheat is implemented.
How is the cheat implemented?
You briefly talked about him solving it by implementing the next block says this endless string of mysteries. How do they solve it?
Yeah, well, it's the longest. It's the highest proof of work chain is the one that. So if there is a discrepancy, which there periodically are, the discrepancies get resolved by all participants in the system, not through the authority of any one individual. Right, he's still holding true to the distributed consensus, but through an independent authority, which isn't any individual. It's the proof of work, the chain with the most proof of work, which isn't up to anybody to decide, which isn't in anybody's hierarchy. It's a game of chance, ends up being the ultimate decision-making authority here. So he's got something that nobody can control because he's relying on pseudo-random, deterministic functions to settle the score. And by settling the score eventually, but it's not like 3 years from now we'll have consensus. It's within a block, within another 10 minutes, we'll have global consensus. And so instead of aiming for consensus right out of the gate, saying we'll have consensus in 10, 20, 60 minutes is good enough. And that's why Bitcoin works, right? Like at the end of the day, the big innovations in Bitcoin are using proof of work to settle the score and the difficulty adjustment to ensure that the proof of work on average gets completed and settled once every 10 minutes. That's the magic. That's the brilliance in the design And then everything else falls in and works around that. I mean, some people will obviously say the fixed supply and the issuance schedule are important, and I don't think they're unimportant. But the other decisions could have been made there, whereas the right ballpark of time between uh, blocks being discovered, the difficulty adjustment to keep that steady, and the proof of work as the settling mechanism, as a dispute resolution mechanism, which again is nobody's control. That was the brilliance that made this decentralized system possible.
All right, so that's the backbone of the decentralized system. But how does Bitcoin maintain its autonomy in that environment, right? So if
Yeah.
you've got a proof of work where your energy and your hardware is going to tend to centralize, um, how does Bitcoin maintain its autonomy without a CEO or a board
Right.
or
Well,
some
listen,
governing
that's
body?
I tried to talk about that as the third mystery. So you've obviously read the article because these are real layups. The third mystery is that Bitcoin is autonomous. Corporations aren't autonomous. They have people run them, and governments aren't autonomous. They have people run them, and all these human institutions are not autonomous. They have people run them, and then Bitcoin has no CEO. And it's one of the best memes out there, the Bitcoin CEO meme. And Bitcoin has no employees at all, and it's not incorporated. It's not a company. It's a very different kind of entity. It's like a living being. And Ralph
No employees,
Merkel.
but it still
Wait,
pays people.
Tomer, are you telling me no one is a leader for a CEO for Bitcoin? Like
Well,
6 years now, no development has happened. 6 years, we're waiting, Tomer.
Yeah, I know. And if
I want to
only
talk
we
to the
would be in
manager.
charge. All right. If only we had someone to lead us, then we could truly be their slave. But sadly, we have no slave master in Bitcoin, and that's fine by some of us, I suppose. That we're all in it together, ensuring this. But I think this is really actually very profound because you try to build something that's autonomous, that maintains itself. And I've written in another article, which since you guys were talking before the show about the why files, these mysteries, I wrote an article
Shout out to
called
the
"Why
Y Files.
People Wonder if Bitcoin is Alien Technology" a couple of years ago, and Bitcoin, again, unlike other man-made things, which you can adjust, right? Like if there's something's wrong with your car, you tighten the screw, you change the oil, you make adjustments so that it's in balance and perfect. And Bitcoin won't let anyone adjust it. It'll adjust itself. Thank you very much, right? That's what the difficulty adjustment is. It looks back and says, how did I perform over the last 2 weeks or 2016 blocks? This is the adjustment I'm going to make to myself. And if you go in and change the code and adjust it yourself, your version of Bitcoin will die.
Mhm.
It will cease to receive. Like if you make the difficulty adjustment different, you will reject valid blocks or accept invalid blocks, and you will not be a part of Bitcoin anymore. So Bitcoin is a system that doesn't allow humans to maintain it. It maintains itself in this regard, right? And that's really, really remarkable. So it's got this autonomous quality, and the way that it achieves this autonomy, and this isn't like, I don't think any of us really fully understand every aspect of this. We can just kind of observe it and see how does some aspects of it work. And one aspect of it is it pays people to keep it alive, right? It rewards them. What does it pay them? It doesn't pay them in dollars. It doesn't pay them in gold. It pays them in this totally made up thing called Bitcoin. So Bitcoin pays people in Bitcoin to keep Bitcoin alive. It's kind of circular. But which people does it pay? It pays people who recognize the value of Bitcoin, and perceive it to be undervalued, right? Anyone who says, "Oh, listen, I can see that Bitcoin is valuable, but I think it's only worth $10,000 a coin," is not going to start mining Bitcoin. Is not going to work hard at it. So it's constantly encouraging people who see more value in it than it currently is reflected in the free market to provide it with energy,
Now,
and it can
you gotta be
adjust.
you got to be
Sorry,
careful, Tomer, because what you're describing is sounding less and less like a program and more like an
a
entity.
living
an abusive
a
relationship.
smart, a very smart entity, right? Because it engages so how is it engaging these people? It's engaging their minds, right? It's engaging their whole thought process around what is value, what is money, what ought money to be, how should money work. It's asking them, it's making them ask questions that that they never really asked their whole life. Right? Like, so I'm working on a sequel to this article, The Mysteries of Bitcoin, which is Bitcoin demystifying money. Right, so it's taking the mystery out of
you
money.
set yourself up for
And,
life. You said Bitcoin is an unending mysteries. And now I can write
right,
articles
but
forever.
one of the things it does mysteriously is it mysteriously demystifies money. Like right now, money is this opaque wall. Like, well, we all use it. You know, Homer Simpson says money can be used to buy goods and services. It is about the best philosophy you get, because if you listen to Paul Krugman or any of the other Nobel Prize winning laureates, they don't have a clue what money is. They're just making up stuff, meandering all over the place. But Bitcoin asks you to think about what money is. And in that demystifying Bitcoin article that I'm writing, it really is, you know, when you're trying to orange pill somebody or talking to somebody about Bitcoin, they always hit you with the same types of questions, right? They're like, well, it hasn't been around long enough. You can't touch it. The government will shut it down. The price is too volatile. And what I'm trying to point out in this article is like, you should actually turn this around on people and say, like, well, why doesn't the government want to shut down the current fiat money standard? Is it really to their advantage to keep it going? And why would they want to shut down Bitcoin? But even more importantly, around all of these questions, like what is money? Like, how long do you know how short a time fiat money has been around? The euro is only 10 years older than Bitcoin, like to the day, pretty much, right? And it's struggling. Do you know that your fiat money, Bitcoin's price is volatile, up in the upwards direction on the long term, right? There's no volatility in the dollar value. It's other than down, right? It only goes down in value relative to your purchasing power. It's lost 90% of its purchasing power since it became fiat issued. So when you start to turn these questions around on people and make them think about money, they can think about Bitcoin more credibly rather than dismissively. Oh, it's young. Gold's been around for a long time. All this sort of stuff. So that's the point. But kind of bringing it back around to what we were just talking about from this article, it is like Bitcoin engages you intellectually, right? It engages your mind, and it just stands there and makes this offer that says, look, there's only ever going to be 21 million of me, like units of me. They can't be stolen. They can be held pseudonymously. You can figure out ways to make them more valuable if you want. I'm not going to change any of the aspects of my promise. This decentralization, the manner in which I continue to reveal new mysteries to you, all these things here, take me as I am or don't. But for the people who do, they're always going to find more value in it. And I think one of the really fascinating things about Bitcoin is in all this time, more and more people keep getting persuaded about its greater value. Right? It takes time. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Do you think that Bitcoin is an AI? Like the way that we're talking about it, it almost seems like this when we're talking about it's autonomous. You know, it almost seems like an AI in a sense. When you first look at it, you would say there's no way. But then when you break it down like this, it almost seems like, is this the realest AI that we've ever encountered?
Well, I think it's maybe the closest thing to it's maybe the closest thing to a general intelligence that's non-human that we've seen, but I'm not sure that it's artificial because its thinking is the conglomeration of all of us, right? Like it's not doing the thinking artificially. It's doing it like the difference between artificial and natural. Artificial things are things that are man-made. Natural things are things that occur within man, right? So like we've got natural intelligence. And I think it's just in the same way that you are the amalgam of all the cells that are independent cells within your body, but they form something that can think coming out of the, like no one neuron in your brain does the thinking. It's the combined thinking. And I think this is how Bitcoin's intelligence, problem solving, thriving actually works. It's like all of us are interacting with each other as we are here, sharing information back and forth as neurons in your brain are doing with one another, creating a field of consciousness that operates on a different time scale and a different physical scale. And that's what's actually going on here. So I'm careful, like I'm happy to call Bitcoin an artificial life form, but I think its intelligence is
It's a
cybernetic.
reflection. It seems like it's
It's
a
a
reflection
combination.
of it's a reflection of the humans that interact with it. It's
Yes.
intelligent.
Yes. Yeah. I wrote one article a couple of years ago called How Bitcoin is like a giant cybernetic meta brain that covered this. It's a little lengthy. I think an easier way to get to it is an article that I wrote recently that Greg made a video of called Hello, I'm Bitcoin, which
Mhm.
is written in the first person of Bitcoin, saying, Hello, I'm Bitcoin. I'm an artificial life form. And it goes on from there, talking about, and towards the end, it talks about this particular point about how Bitcoin solves its problems. Like a great example was some people raised concerns that Bitcoin was bad for the environment. And a bunch of people who are a part of Bitcoin
Mhm.
looked at the problem and they didn't come up with a bunch of lies. They said, let's study the problem and let's see, is Bitcoin really bad for the environment? And a number of different, conscious thoughts came out of this. One is, well, there's a question as to how much energy is actually bad for the environment in the first place to begin with. A little bit of warming may be true. It's not necessarily bad, especially if it's warming up parts of the planet that could use the warmth for more life. It's actually greenhouse gases remarkably green the planet. But more so, it was discovered that Bitcoin actually provides this incredible load balancing capability on the electric grids that we have, and is a better technology for applying non-polluting, non-emission forms of energy creation, so that we can rely less on the pollution-emitting sources of energy. This is because the
Just
demand
to
flow
be clear,
changes
when you're
all the
talking
time.
about pollution, you're talking about plant food, right? CO2.
Yeah, well, I think that different people frame it differently.
CO2.
Yeah, carbon dioxide, carbon being the basic building molecule um, of life, and oxygen obviously being reasonably important too. And,
Waste
and,
products.
and carbon dioxide being the food that all plants require. If you've heard of photosynthesis, which is how
Yes.
energy enters the biosphere.
You know what I'm thinking as I'm like listening to all this. It really, I'm just like all of a sudden I'm reminded of Sesame Street. In Sesame Street, like you have all these weird characters. You have Big Bird, you have this other grumpy guy coming out of the garbage can, and then there's
Hey.
always this scene. There you
Yellow.
go, where the adult, comes and explains stuff to these characters who are fighting amongst themselves with the sound of reason and quiet and authority, and sort of seems to have all the knowledge which all adults have. When you're a kid watching Sesame Street,
Hmm.
like you seem to have that, Tomer. Like the minute you start talking, I don't know if it's like your deep, calm voice, or clearly the vast amount of knowledge that only an adult can have, amongst a bunch of kids, or what it is. That's a compliment that I'm trying to give you here. But Greg said I'll skip the introduction, but I'm really curious, like where does that come from, or I am a little bit curious about that.
I'm working at the newspaper.
I
This is
think
actually
I've always been a very curious person. And I've been curious about money since I was a kid. I was an immigrant from a country that had hyperinflation, and my parents told me about it. So I was curious in that regard. I loved to study philosophy on my own, not through formal academic channels. And objectivity's been really important to me in that pursuit of truth, because I think anytime you release your objectivity, you find yourself connecting dots that don't connect, and finding yourself holding on to ideas that don't correspond to reality. And so for me, a lot of that journey before I ever heard of Bitcoin was this quest for truth, this quest for knowledge. And then I came across Bitcoin, and like I mentioned in my article, in the early days of Bitcoin, that there were all these people who were curious to see, did this mystery actually get solved? I felt that there was something in Bitcoin that it was even bigger. Like, did some giant problem in our world get solved by this thing? I'd already lived through we'd all, by the time we'd heard of Bitcoin, lived through the 2008 financial crisis. But the way it affected me was I saw a lot of corruption. I saw a lot of people who should have lost money get bailed out and get rewarded money at the expense of other people who had been working really hard. And I felt that there was some tremendous injustice in that. And I could see that gold wasn't the solution. It was never going to come back. It wasn't the fix. And then, it was around 2013. It was in 2013 that I came across Bitcoin. And just the more and more that I studied it, the more and more I realized there is something really special and magical here. And it's important to understand it for what it is rather than to sell it for what it isn't, which is, of course, what every one of the shitcoin projects tries to be. It's again from these folks who are misguided and they think the point of money is to do unto others before they do unto you, right? Scam the other guy before he scams you. And that's a dead end, right? Like if you're trying to scam somebody and they're trying to scam you, one of you is going to be the loser. And what are you going to end up with? You're going to end up with some scammer's wealth. So it doesn't scale. It doesn't create a civilization. Whereas people doing things of real value for one another that can go on for a really long time, multi-generations, that's real value, and that's really moral. And so that's what philosophically drew me more into Bitcoin. I was fascinated by its engineering, but I was even more fascinated by the moral implications I thought it was going to have on human civilization, especially in the height of the fiat world where everyone was in it for themselves for the short term, raiding pensions, offshoring jobs, like just really not taking care, like shitting in their own nest is the right expression. I think we've shit on our own civilization for too long.
Do you think what one of the greatest mysteries, at least for me, is the timing of Bitcoin, how it came, right? Like it's coming at the right time, right? Like it came in, obviously the world didn't, there wasn't crazy hyperinflation right after 2008,
right.
But we're starting to see it in pockets and in different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And as Bitcoin is needed, now there's more people that are aware of it. There's more knowledge and education about it, even than 5 years ago in 6 years ago in 2017. It's really starting to blossom. How much education, and in many different languages.
Right.
I think that for me is one of the biggest mysteries, is how it's just coming into its form at the right time.
Yeah, there's a part. There's this really bright. I was talking again with a couple of people before the show. There's a really great University of Toronto professor named John Vervaeke, and he's got a wonderful series, 50 hours long, called Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. But one of the concepts that he introduces in it is a word called transjectivity, and it's meant in contrast to like objectivity or subjectivity. Objectivity is like, well, these things happen independent of individuals, and subjectivity is these things are all in our minds, right? This whole universe I'm seeing is just a subjective realm, and part of what he's discussing in this notion of transjectivity is it's neither one of those things is the whole truth. It's like we affect the environment that we're in, and the environment that we're in is affected, and that affects us, and then we affect it back. And so we co-create the environment around us with our environment. And I think that's the kind of thing that's actually happening here with Bitcoin. Like a bunch of technologies, all the technologies that are used in Bitcoin, secure hash algorithms, digital signatures, and peer-to-peer software. That's really everything, right? That's everything that Satoshi put together. Is those, and they all existed, right? We'd all interacted with peer-to-peer software through music sharing, file sharing sites, Tor, not Tor, no, not Tor. What? How do we download files? BitTorrent, and secure hash algorithms had existed for a long time. In fact, even the one application of it called Proof of Work had been sitting on the shelf for 9 years before Satoshi pulled it off, right? It had been discovered 9 years before, and digital signatures were already in the public domain. So Satoshi kind of came in, and I think he MacGyvered together these three pieces of technology with a little bit of duct tape and glue, and set it out there. And like these three old things that had been sitting on the shelf that seemed to have found limited application, he put them together and he created something out of them that no government in the world could stop, no nuclear weapon in the world could stop, nothing could stop. And it's this really remarkable invention. So you I kind of think, wow, Satoshi is like either so artistically brilliant, such a savant, or such a super intelligence, like himself a non-human intelligence. I still toy with that idea from time to time, because the closer I look at these things, or the more I see like there's a few things about just the time frame that he was thinking of, right? Living in a time where everyone was thinking about next quarter's results, how do we survive to the next day? He built something that would work forever, an endless chain of mysteries, and designed it without intervention or maintenance to last forever. Like the computer programmers at the time, just before, didn't in the 1990s, didn't think about the Y2K bug. They were like, well, let's ship this thing and get it out there. They didn't build it to last for 10 years. And here he's built something to last for essentially infinity, like to eternity. And that's actually something we need with money, right? When you actually zoom out on the history of money, you end up seeing a lot of charts of like, from 1600 to 1793, this was, people used this gold coin or this silver coin. Like these things are meant to last, to be bearer instruments that get handed down from one generation to the next, that can be stored in a couch for 1,000 years, right? Hidden someplace in a treasure chest for forever, and still be familiar enough that they can be used as money. And so he took that into consideration. He didn't, in the software industry, where everything's built to be obsolete by the next year, right? Like Bitcoin 2.0, Bitcoin 3.0, like we're on Bitcoin. There's no 1.0, there's no 2.0, there's Bitcoin, and it's here forever. So just a really, I don't even know what question you were asking. I've gone off on a tangent.
No, but it does make me think, like, you look at something like Argentina, right? Argentina went through a restructuring of their money in 2000, 2001 timeframe, and now they're already back at over 100% inflation in 2023. And so, like, even if that was a 100-year thing in fiat, like every 100 years, your currency, well, the people that are living and are making money, that have made their money, that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, that have saved up, are utterly screwed as soon as that hyperinflationary event happens to them. And so, how you need something that's built to last and not built to fail.
Absolutely.
So,
I think that's where people who have the low time preference, the view of human civilization as a continuous thing, not as there's a civilization to be raided and looted, and who cares, we're all dead in the long run. Like we are not, that's Keynes' famous line, which he actually uses to justify inflation and theft and monetary policy and taxation and everything else. And it's not true. Like someone's still alive in the long run if we don't kill ourselves, right? And that's who we should be not robbing from. But fiat money does the opposite. It steals from unborn children, right? Like every child is born owing $80,000, $100,000 for something that they never bought, they never paid for, they never got to consume, right? And they're born with this burden on their shoulders because they've been robbed before they were even born. And so it's like, who's the time traveler here, right? Like Nixon is the time traveler who stole from all the children when he closed the gold window. He went into the future and stole all the money, not, and Satoshi's just setting it right again to say, stop stealing from the future. You can't do it anymore if you use this as money. So he's not the time traveler. He's the person living in the present, projecting forward into time, not stealing from the future.
So Satoshi's the Robin Hood to who's the bad guy?
Prince
King
John or
John.
something.
Yeah, Prince John.
Yeah. I don't really know the story of Robin Hood all that well, but he's not stealing. Like Satoshi's not stealing from anybody and giving to anybody else. He's preventing stealing, right? That's what Bitcoin is. It's preventing stealing through seizures, preventing stealing through inflation.
What did you say, Greg? I can't hear you.
There are people who would say he's stealing from them.
Thieves.
Yeah, but they're thieves anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Scam the scammers.
If you're a thief, you don't really get to blame to be critical of thieves. It's a little hypocritical.
All right, so I don't know how Barry got in here, but since he's here, I'm going to make him work. Barry, you there?
No.
Yep.
No.
Don't make him work?
No.
Mike.
All right, well, we need scores.
No, Mike.
So where are they coming from?
From Yellow.
From Yellow? All right,
Yeah.
Barry, shut up. Yellow, are you going to give the scores? No.
What?
Scores. It's time for scores, sir.
Oh, scores. Okay, let Barry do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Are we on a sales call?
Scores. So we're gonna give Becca one sloppy yellow plushie.
Oh,
I already got it.
We're gonna give Greg 3 roast beef sandwiches.
right.
Sean, I liked your performance today, Sean. You're going to get 4 additional rolls of towels for your closet behind you.
Oh, I needed those. I needed those.
Yep.
You can never have enough paper product.
No.
Yeah,
Haven't you been seeing?
rope.
I saw
Who
Biden
won
get
the
a
next
shot the other
lockdowns?
day.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
They're coming mid-September, apparently.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. It's already been in the news.
Rope gets a dozen 23andMe DNA tests for his dating life.
Yes.
He's not that
Jeez.
successful.
Plan Marcus gets 3 Apple AirPod Pro Maxes. And then Tomer, I'm going to give you 21 million Bitcoin. Good job today.
That's a good number.
Barry just stole my Bitcoin and gave it to Tomer.
Oh,
You
No,
skipped,
I
you skipped
didn't.
yellow.
That was-
I don't know
We said
yellow's
it
on
was
purpose.
stealing Bitcoin.
what did yellow
You
get?
stole Rope's yellow, so
Yeah,
that
yellow
if you're a
gets
thief, you can't
the
complain
mute
about it.
button.
Fuck you.
I
Okay,
will hold
bye,
my breath for
Barry.
my reward. I'll settle for just 1 Bitcoin, by the way.
All right,
Oh, just one.
Okay. Yeah.
It's
Yellow
always
gets an
harder to
yeah,
tell.
he's got a couple left in Mount Gox that he can send to you.
Okay. I'll take those.
All right, Barry. Go back to being mute.
Damn it.
All right, so on Nasser today, Braveheart wanted me to ask you, how do you remain so calm all the time?
Ooh.
There's an assumption in that question that is false.
You hear that, Braveheart? False.
I'm calm
What-
during
what-
some of these shows, but I'm a human being as well, so I have
What
a
or
full
who
range of
was the
emotions.
last person?
Sorry?
Where are you going with this one?
I said, what or who was the last person or thing that broke that character?
It's obviously my family, my kids.
Okay, yeah. Good answer. Good answer.
All right, so I want to break out the crystal ball. Because we spent a bunch of time talking about the mysteries of Bitcoin.
Ooh.
If they are unending,
Mm.
where do you see? What are the future mysteries you see Bitcoin providing us with?
I think the biggest one for me that I'm concentrating on is how it reorganizes and reinvents what we call government. I just think government has become something today that is popularity contests of people making promises to give you money that they don't have a moral right to give to you because it's not theirs, right? I'll steal it from other people through inflation and taxation. And that's what money's become. And that's what government has become. And this has not always been government, right? It was not government when government couldn't print money into oblivion, couldn't enter debt into oblivion. And I really recommend people. Lynn Alden has a new book that's like literally just came out today, called Broken Money. And on the Swan blog site, swan.com/blog, we just published chapter 8 of it, and you can get chapter 7 and 8. And it's a history of money and a history of why fiat has mentioned it is not to plug the Swan blog site. I think she's done the best job of of providing the historical analysis that's fact-based, accurate, and objective, and also doing the interpretation of what this has led to. And for me, my thinking about government on this is, well, governments used to be different things. There were bad governments, there were better governments, there were good government, and now we're kind of in this corrupt government thing. And it's really because the fiat is playing out so significantly, it's becoming really ugly. Right? Like we can see that all our politicians on both sides of the political spectrum are in it for themselves. They're not in it for the people that they're making promises to. The people are, their votes are being bought so that the politicians can benefit much more greatly than the society as a whole. And the society is being sacrificed for the benefit of the few. at the top of it. And this needs to change. And it can only change when you take the power to print money out of the hands of government. But what is left afterwards, right? The reason I was mentioning Lynn's article because I just read it today, but she actually refers to Seyfedine's theory that World War I never really ended. World War I, money was borrowed to finance the war, and then, unlike all other wars where the government ran out of money and had to stop warring,
the Rothschilds made their money in the Napoleonic Wars. World War I is a continuation.
I maybe not know enough of these history of these points. You're all connecting here, but it's like
yellow apple fever.
Yellow apple fever.
Yellow apple fever. When you connect it
apple phenia, or you might remind us of what it is. But it's like, we're in this enduring state of war that doesn't end because the governments can always continue to finance it, and they finance it by winning our votes and all these things, and we're all getting poorer, and we're getting less human. I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but I think our humanity is being clean cut, clear cut away, and that I think is something that's going to return when this power is permanently taken out of the hands of government. And the question is, well, what replaces it? And what replaces banking and finance? So again, just one other article I wrote recently, also on the Swan blog, is called "The Bitcoin Breakthrough," and because that's where I publish my material now. So the Bitcoin breakthrough, and it talks about how Bitcoin is a breakthrough in not just money, but in government and in finance. All finance has been this crazy breakthrough, and Lynn does a great job explaining the history of this in her article, in her chapter. Finance became something when people started using ledgers to settle money instead of settling with physical species, with physical gold and physical silver. And the desire to do this was because ledgers are just much faster and, in a sense, much more secure from theft than gold. You ship your gold on a ship overseas. The ship never makes it back home. You wonder what happened. You don't actually know. The pirates steal it. But if you're just making if you're sending an entry in over a telegraph wire that someone can make, then it's more secure. The only people who can steal in that situation, by the way, are the bankers, the ones who are making the entries in the ledger. So the bankers are not opposed to a system in which they're the only ones who can steal. In a system where pirates can steal, that's a bad system. But they can always erase something in the ledger. And so you ended up with these giant banking cities like London, England initially, and ultimately New York City. And the problem, and so they didn't see the need for gold. They could see the weakness in the system, and in fact exploited the weakness in the system, and that's why we've ended up where we've ended up. To make a not too long story really short, and this is what Lynn is pointing out Bitcoin can actually fix. Right? She said speed won over species or over settlement, and now Bitcoin brings speed back with settlement. Right? So you can now send Bitcoin overseas in 10 minutes. And you don't risk the inflation, right? The cheating in the ledger is what's ravaged the working class, middle class, non-banking, non-financial class, and caused the financialization of things that, like, nothing should really be financialized. It should just be monetized. And when houses get financialized, they become more expensive. And when education becomes financialized, it becomes more expensive. And, like, what does it mean to be financialized? For me, the simple thing is, can you go and finance it? Like, you can finance your education, you can finance your house, you can finance your car. That means it's gotten financialized. That means it's more expensive than it needs to be, because bankers are prepared to bid up the price of it by putting dollars to let you pay for it gradually rather than all at once.
Well, just a little tidbit about war. You're talking about the World War I hasn't ever finished, right? And how wars are financialized even now.
Yes.
It was something that's interesting that I was reading in this book called The Shadows of Power, and it mentioned how actually during the Civil War in the United States, there was a small brief period of income tax that happened. And then as that war ended, they stopped income tax. They actually stopped it. And then in 1913, they reintroduced income tax. Then they introduced the central bank, the Federal Reserve, in that same year. And then in 1914, World War I began, right? And so all of those things happened. And then income tax has only gotten higher and higher, and the Fed has only printed more and more money. And more wars continue to happen.
Yeah. And all kinds of wars now. Like the war has evolved from men meeting in a battlefield at a preset time with muskets and shooting until no one was left standing, to aerial bombardment, and now to psychological warfare, and also and data warfare, cyber warfare. And so the concept of war continues to expand, and what's it really all about at the end of the day? It's about seizing wealth. Right, taking wealth by force. And that's, again, one of these other things that Bitcoin says, no, the only way you can use force in Bitcoin is to protect wealth, is to secure wealth, not to seize it, right? And I think that's, again, one of these so revolutionary concepts. It's like anti-war, right? So that when Jason Lowery came up with his book, Soft War, and his concept, it's like, close. There's something here that's similar to war, but also something that's so different. There's no bloodshed, there's no destruction, there's only preservation and protection. All the energy, what was the term he was using? Force projection, right? All the force projection that goes into Bitcoin is used to protect, not to destroy. You can't destroy a block. You can only reinforce all the previous blocks by adding a new block on top of it. So all the force that you're projecting is not being used to destroy a single thing. It's being used to preserve the record with more integrity and more protection. So it really is a force field, a force shield, more than a weapon of destruction and seizure. And I think that's for me the fundamental distinction between like what wars are about. Wars are initiated to try to take something that somebody else has. And because whether you think it's unjust or not, who cares, right? Like that's what's going on in a war, and that's why war can take on so many different dimensions other than just blowing shit up. And why I think we're living through, World War 1.15, which is this psychological warfare, psyop warfare, cyber warfare that we're all trying to make sense of, and we're struggling, and that's why we're watching strange podcasts and trying to figure out how to make Bitcoin a world monetary standard.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in the process of watching World War III cook off over the last year or two, anyway. But we don't have enough time to talk about that tonight.
I think we went through it.
What a positive note, Craig. Thanks.
Anytime, Yellow.
Well, it couldn't be the nuclear war, because the nuclear war nobody can initiate, but the kind of wealth seizure that we lived through and are living through right now, and the COVID lockdowns and everything else, it felt a lot like being in a war, didn't it? I mean, maybe some of you haven't been in a war, but everyone go to your bomb shelter, which was your house, stay indoors. Like the whole world got locked down.
Yeah, the old saying, hunkered and bunkered down, right?
Yeah, like it was, and so we didn't go out, we didn't spend money, we didn't do things, and that was a very warlike mentality. I think you were filled with fear of death, fear of illness, fear of destruction, and a lot was destroyed too, right? Like the healthcare system was set back tremendously. Tons of businesses went out of business. Like just our ability to be happy and go to restaurants and all that, movies and social life was destroyed. So something very real got destroyed in a very significant scale all over the world. That was World War III. I don't know who, and it was this covert warfare. Like we still don't even know who the enemy was, who attacked us. But it was kind of like we attacked our immune system turned against us.
Well, I think we all have a few guesses.
Who? Wuhan.
But
World Health Organization.
all right, before we get demonetized here, I'm glad we got Rusty here because he's the closest thing we have to a British accent. So, Rusty, good morning. While we have you, would you mind Marty's question with Tony?
Good morning. How's everybody this beautiful? How's everyone this beautiful morning? Hey, Taylor.
It's not morning, Rusty.
It's nighttime.
It's literally.
It is morning.
It's literally 10:30.
It is morning.
I'm
It's
No.
looking.
Not
evening.
that,
I'm looking
it's not our
at the
fault that
sun.
you're living in a parallel universe, okay?
Upside
We,
down. He's
we need
upside down here.
decentralized consensus on the
Yeah,
timing.
called Australia.
Okay.
Australia.
So obviously, I've forked time, is what you're saying. I've forked time,
Oh,
and I'm the only one on my time chain.
Yeah, you
Okay.
folk.
yeah, what
Right.
block are you working on? Do you have
You
a
live in
secret?
a you live in a place where you have huge
In a
rabbits
world
that play box, man.
where you
Come
play
What's
on.
today?
boxman.
What's today, Rusty? What's today?
Yeah. So
Friday.
it's Friday. I know.
No, it's
I know
not.
you guys are gonna
No.
disagree with me, but it's Friday. Trust me. I'm literally looking at Friday. We
What's
talked
the
about this before.
what's the price of Bitcoin on Friday?
Yeah, so it's higher than the price over there. So
We can all agree on
currently the
blocking
price
at
of
least.
Bitcoin. Let me just quickly double check. 40,795
Dollar
What?
dues?
Australia.
Are we talking about kangaroo dollars or what?
Didgeridoo
Kangaroo.
dollars?
dollary dues.
You know what, Marcus? Dr. Jeff was right.
Ooh.
Oh god.
Hey, I got a question for Toma. Did you guys talk about house prices?
House prices? No.
Just say yes.
Well, we
Well,
mentioned
'cause
we briefly mentioned financialization.
yeah, funny. That's when I kind of came into the conversation, and I've been thinking about this a lot. What happens when? So at the moment, we've been pushing all of our savings into our houses. Like that's like our saving mechanism because we don't have real money.
Yeah.
So what happens to all the like, and that's pretty much everyone. You know, maybe people that are renting are okay. The people that have bought houses and relying on that and paying mortgages. What happens when it goes the other way and we realize we don't have to save in our houses and we start saving in just money? Everybody just gets wrecked, or what happens at that point? Is that one of the reasons why they can't let it happen?
That's a good question. I mean, and it's very complicated. So I don't have an answer because the question is, does it happen gradually? Does it happen quickly? What happens to all the debt? Like if someone's got $1 million house with $500,000 mortgage, just to pick round numbers, do you end up seeing the debt essentially be forgiven because the dollar goes flat, or do you see people suddenly losing all their equity in their house because the value of the house goes down? Like if the value of the house goes down to what was $500,000, but it's all in Bitcoin now. Is anyone
Why
trying
not
to
both?
dollars or not? Are they worth anything? Right? Like if the dollar goes to zero and you had $1 million house, the house doesn't go to zero, right? It goes to infinity dollars, and you had $500,000 worth of debt. So it's
Wealthy
like,
beyond
okay,
belief.
well, the debt just got paid off. But the house is not worth as many years' salary as it used to be worth because it was financialized. So there's a bit of a balancing act there. And if you had all your retirement stored in your house, you probably have less retirement funds, but they're not subject to inflation anymore. So I think it's a real balancing act. I think when you look at countries that have had hyperinflationary events without seizure of property outside of money, like people who owned real estate weren't terribly affected. They had a house that was worth 1,000 of whatever, 100,000 of whatever the previous currency was, and that was worth 1,000,000 of that previous currency, or 100,000 of what the new currency is. So people with real assets don't end up being wrecked to the same degree, but people who are really highly leveraged. In dollars may even do fine. It's very hard to say because I think the scenario can play out in a bunch of different ways. It's not everybody gets wrecked, everybody owes their money to the banks, right? Like that's what's happening right now, very gradually through the increased interest rates as people's mortgages roll over, or if they're on variable rate mortgages, suddenly the house prices are going down, or the houses aren't moving, and their payments are higher, and they're still on the dollar standard. And so they have to make more dollars to pay for the same house that they thought they bought for a certain amount of money. Well, their monthly payments are going to go way up. And they're hoping the value of the house goes
They're hoping
down.
their wages go up as fast as
We're all hoping for that. That's not going to happen, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of moving parts in an economy. It's a very dynamic system. And it's hard to say exactly what's going to be. I think the accelerationist camp in Bitcoin is like, let's get this over with. Let's move on to a Bitcoin standard and get it done with. I think that's going to take time. Like, there's no way to make it happen overnight unless all the world's governments actually agree to. And it's going to take them some time. But I do think that I think as we observe what's going on now, like 2 years ago, all the Bitcoiners were warning about inflation. Warning, 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 warning. Like, we can see this coming. And it came. And the central bankers are, oh, we didn't see it coming. We thought it was only going to be transient. Like that. So there's a problem.
Transitory, yeah.
But I think the Bitcoiners, they don't have perfect vision into the future, but they definitely see into the future better than the central bankers' rhetoric. And I don't know what the central bankers might actually know, but what they say sure makes them look like idiots. And I think what we're seeing is there's more and more need for Bitcoin to settle all these problems, to solve all of these problems. And the articles that I was mentioning that Lynn wrote, and probably her whole book, I haven't had an opportunity to read it yet, is really great. So there's a few great books coming out, and I think this is one of the most exciting things in Bitcoin. It's been a little while since we've seen significant content come out, and like Eric Hayson has a book
Thank you
out.
very much.
Yeah, Yellow. I can't wait to read your book. Is it coloring with crayons or?
It's about Bitcoin.
That's the flavor
Bitcoin.
profile brand.
It's called Bitcoin, an abusive relationship.
Perfect. I can't.
Actually, on that, Toma, Yellow does have something coming to you. So all of our guests, this is new to the Meme Factory. All of our guests now receive a yellow plushie.
That's amazing.
A yellow plushie. So congratulations, you're our first recipient. You're our first guest recipient of a yellow plushie.
It's going to go right on my
That'd be great.
shelf here of
Beautiful.
Bitcoin collectibles.
Can we afford that?
On the altar.
Which one? Send me an NFT of one, Yellow.
We'll talk about this. We'll talk about this after Yellow. We should, yeah.
Okay.
We only have one guest a week. I'm doing the math, so it should be fine.
We'll finance it. Just borrow money to pay for it. Yellow.
Yeah.
We'll financialize it.
Surely some banker will lend you money to do this.
I'll send you a DM for an OPSEC address from you to send a yellow to. But I have another question actually for you. Would you fancy a cup of tea, Toma? Would you like a cup of tea?
Oh, that's delightful.
All right. While we're sitting on our tea, we do have a question for you. So if the Meme Factory did exist, and we all know it doesn't, which one of us would you mute? Which one of us would you repost? And which one of us would you like? And also, which one of us would you zap?
Oh, man. All right. Sorry, mute, like, repost, and zap, right?
Yeah, actually, you're one of the first guests that have remembered all of the four things. Like, straight up.
I mean, so like to mute
impressive.
permanently, I would not mute any of you guys permanently.
That's not a correct answer. We don't. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
you
gotta
got
be-
muting Greg. I don't like the sound.
Yeah, that was easy. That
There
was
you go.
easy.
There it is.
I will zap Sean. I will like Becca, and I will repost you.
Ooh.
Oh.
Just
I'm
to
just getting it out of the
clarify,
way.
when you say you, just to
Yeah.
say, you
And you
you're
rest.
one of Rusty. Yeah, cool. Okay.
Bless you.
Gotcha, roger that. Thank you.
The poser of the question.
I got some of Tomer's sets now.
Thank you,
Right.
Rusty. All right,
And zap you on the master if you want.
let's pass this baton off to Sean here.
Okay, speaking of me and zapping, Tomer, you already know what happens. Block height 840,000, right?
Yeah, something gets cut in half.
Yeah, the halving.
Actually,
happens.
840,000. Yeah.
840,000 block height. We have invited you already down to the halving party. Have you been to El Salvador yet?
No, not yet. Not yet. I've had difficulties traveling for personal issues, so my
Okay.
travel schedule is very away from family is very restricted. I would like to make it, and I just can't commit yet until I see some hopefully health improvements with a certain family member of mine.
That's a yes.
That's a yes.
That's a yes.
Well,
Confirmed.
well,
Camera
It'll
is
be a
coming.
miracle, and I'll be there.
Family is first for sure. But if everything that we hope everything ends up going well with your family member.
Yeah, thank you.
And if it does, come on down to the having party because it's gonna be a blast in El Salvador. there's so many things going on in that country that you don't even realize until you make it down there. So
Yeah,
definitely,
no, I'm super eager to go, and like I said,
yeah,
a personal matter is holding me back. But if
yeah,
that personal matter is resolved, then I will definitely make it there because I'm dying to go there. I'm dying to go to Costa Rica, which I've also never been to,
yeah.
and and yeah,
We'll we'll say a meme factory prayer for you and your family.
yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what a meme factory prayer sounds and/or looks like. But, Tomer, if you could take a moment and tell anybody still listening or watching where they can find you and your materials.
There are people who listen or watch to this podcast.
So at least a dozen.
Meme factory
All
doesn't.
13.
Yeah.
A meme factory doesn't.
Yeah. So my NPub is
Go on, Labra.
is at the top of my Twitter feed. It's my pinned post on my Twitter feed, which is at Tomer Strolight. And I professionally write for Swan Bitcoin, so you can see a lot of my stuff at the Swan blog, swan.com/blog. There's I've written a lot of articles independently on Medium, which is medium.com/Tomer Strolight or so at Tomer Strolight. Not hard to find. I've got a movie, a couple of short films, one 15 minutes, one 7 minutes on YouTube. The first is called Bitcoin is Generational Wealth. The second is called Bitcoin is Beautiful. They're both on Swan's Bitcoin channel. So you can find them there. And I don't know where else you need to find me. Sometimes I'm on Cafe Bitcoin in the morning. Sometimes I'm on the Meme Factory. But if you follow me on Twitter or X, whatever Elon's going to call it next week. If you follow me there, you'll probably be able to keep up with me. Like on my Medium, there's a lot of articles where there are also links to podcasts. I've got an article there called "Listen to Me," which is old podcast appearances, but I think some of my older material, some of my best stuff. So
Don't forget about your book. That's got that cool art.
Oh, my book. So yeah, just a couple of books. So I have a book called Why Bitcoin. You can download for free. Guess where?
Swan.
Yeah, swan.com/whybitcoin. I feel like this is the ad read part, right?
Yeah, where was yellow? Yellow, you were supposed to say Swan right there. Come on, man.
Swan Baker.
There
My
you
friend. Oh, we never showed fractal. We never even went into the fractal.
Let's take a minute and show Fractal's thing because I do
Synchronicity?
want to
Yes.
show that off. That was super cool.
Wrote a book called. Guess where you can download a free copy of it.
Swan.com.
This is
Such
actually
a good cover.
that's a sealed copy, so I'm not going to crack open the seal. But it's like I think it's the first Mid-Journey created what do you call graphic novel, and it's all based off of Dhruv Bansal's Bitcoin astronomy piece. I was involved in helping him edit it, but the artwork in it's fabulous, and I know he's continuing to work on some other things with respect to that. So, so that's the book. You can find a copy of my book on Amazon that's text only, and if you want to find the coffee table version of the book, which is full photo images, it's at a site called blurb.com. Search blurb.com, Tomer Strolight. That's the only book you'll find there. So that's a lot of self-promotion right there, more than I'm used to.
I really want to take a minute and if you could share your screen and show us that Fractal Encrypt project because that was really
let's
cool.
see.
I want to let the audience take a look at that.
Okay.
Especially
So
listeners,
the backstory here, if for people who've been watching since the beginning of the show, I had written this article called Bitcoin: An Endless Chain of Mysteries. And out of the blue, the night after I finished writing it, my friend Fractal Encrypt sent me a DM saying, "Hey, buddy, I'm working on an art piece. I'm wondering if you could help me think of what to name it. It's all about Bitcoin's mysteries." And I was like, you won't believe it. I've just written a thing about mysteries, and it turned out what he was pursuing in his artwork was very much the same themes that I was pursuing. You know, he has this beautiful pattern. I'll get a better image of it to share here. He has this beautiful mathematical tiling pattern here. That's all these blocks, and they stack together, and they leave cutouts of these six-pointed stars in a six-pointed star. In and of itself, so it's kind of like this MC Escher like graphic, and his whole thing was MC Escher was able to use drawings and mathematics to make things on flat surfaces that were impossible in three-dimensional surfaces. He made the impossible possible. And for anyone who was listening before, that was what I pointed out was Satoshi's great invention in creating Bitcoin. He made possible the thing that mathematicians had said was impossible. And it goes on, this endless chain, this recursive chain that he's got in his artwork, and many other things. So it was like somehow we both tuned into the same signal, just each with our own respective artwork. I've somehow shared a rope. I don't know how I did that, unless somebody else did. But this is Fractal's artwork. You can bid on it now at scarce.city. If you go to the BitBlock Boom auction, it's on display at BitBlock Boom in Austin, Texas, right now, so you can see it in real life. I wish I could see it in real life. I've only seen these images of it, but again, it's Fractal Encrypt just does this incredibly beautiful artwork. It's incredibly original and detailed and awesome. Oh, someone else is doing this.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure Greg wants 4 of them so he can put it on his car and have them spinning.
Yes.
Well, you can. You just have to wait. He's apparently going to make 9 in the series. Each one will be unique, but this is number 1 in the series of Bitcoin and Endless Chain of Mysteries.
Very cool. Tomer, thank
Cool.
you for sharing that with us. Thank you for sharing your time with us tonight. Take some time away from your family to do that. And same with all of our listeners. Thank you for spending your time with us tonight. Plenty of other things you could have been doing, and for some reason you're here. Anyway.
Right. Are there actually any listeners?
Oh, yeah.
I've always felt.
Why do you keep saying that?
It's private. It just feels like a private meet up.
That's the way it should feel.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Have a great night. Thanks again for coming
All right,
out.
you too, guys. A pleasure.
Thanks, Summer.
Thanks, Tomer.
Thank you.
See you guys later. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Yeah.